Nearly 18 months after the infamous door plug blowout, Boeing is still struggling to land safely from its trust crisis. The explosive decompression on Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 didn't just send passengers into panic. It shook the entire U.S. aviation industry to its core. Behind a single door ripped from the fuselage lie deep, lingering questions about manufacturing quality and procedural discipline. These concerns reflect a safety culture that, for years, was dangerously neglected, from Boeing's assembly lines to the desks of the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. Now, Boeing isn't just fixing a door, it's fighting to mend a deep fracture in public confidence. In January 2024, just minutes after takeoff from Portland, Oregon, Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 suffered one of the most unusual and alarming incidents in modern U.S. aviation history. The accident occurred while the aircraft was flying at an altitude of 16,000 feet. During a rapid decompression, oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling, and several mobile phones and personal belongings were sucked out through a gaping hole in the fuselage as all 171 passengers struggled against deafening wind and chaos. The first 6 minutes of the flight to Ontario International Airport in Southern California had been uneventful. The plane was halfway through its ascent, traveling at over 400 miles per hour, when passengers reported a loud boom and wind so forceful it ripped the shirt off one person. "We knew something was wrong," passenger Kelly Bartlett told in the days after the flight. "We didn't know what it was. We didn't know how bad it was. We didn't know if it meant we were going to crash." A 2-by-4-foot section of the fuselage, which had been covering an unused emergency exit just behind the left wing, blew out midair. Only 7 seats on the flight were unoccupied, including both seats nearest to that door plug. According to NTSB board member J. Todd Inman, the outcome could have been far worse if the incident had occurred over the ocean or farther from land. However, Alaska Airlines had proactively restricted Flight 1282's aircraft to domestic, overland routes due to unresolved maintenance concerns involving its fuel pumps. Inman noted that the airline had taken this precautionary measure on its own, going beyond the requirements of the FAA. A plug panel covering an unused emergency exit on a Boeing 737 MAX 9 suddenly blew out. It left a gaping hole in the cabin mid-flight. The cause? Merely 4 bolts. According to the official findings released by the National Transportation Safety Board in June 2025, the chain of events began during production at the aircraft manufacturer's Renton, Washington facility. Workers had removed the plug to repair faulty rivets. However, when reinstalling it, no one replaced the 4 critical fasteners meant to secure the panel. Even worse, the entire removal and reinstallation process wasn't documented anywhere, a serious violation of basic aerospace manufacturing standards. In a properly functioning oversight system, this error should have been caught during multiple post-maintenance inspections. But in reality, the jet was certified, delivered, and flown for 154 commercial flights, while an undetected disaster waited to happen at any moment. The Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 incident was not just an isolated manufacturing error. It was the result of a prolonged and overlapping chain of failures, exposing serious vulnerabilities across the plane maker's entire production and safety oversight system, and highlighting alarming regulatory shortcomings at the U.S. Aviation Authority. At the manufacturer, the problem started with a deeply flawed internal safety mindset. Many workers were pushed to meet aggressive production schedules under intense pressure without adequate training. Some had never been taught how to properly remove or reinstall critical components like emergency exit doors. Highly technical tasks were often assigned to inexperienced staff, creating conditions where mistakes became almost inevitable from the earliest stages of assembly. The firm's quality control processes revealed significant gaps. There were no clear guidelines mandating documentation or tracking when key components such as door plugs were removed and reinstalled. This allowed the removal and replacement of the door plug, a task that should have been subject to strict oversight, to occur completely off the record and outside any formal control. The company's internal training system was another major weakness. Following the pandemic, Boeing hired large numbers of new employees but failed to ensure they were properly trained. Many were assigned to safety-critical tasks without completing the necessary instructional programs. Making matters worse, Boeing skipped essential cross-checking procedures, a fundamental standard in the aviation industry. Critical assembly steps like the reinstallation of the door plug should have been independently verified by a separate team. In reality, no one double-checked whether the door had been properly secured with all required bolts. On the regulatory side, the FAA also failed in its oversight role. Despite conducting dozens of inspections at Boeing facilities each year, the agency did not identify any of these critical lapses. Both the NTSB and the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General strongly criticized the regulator for performing superficial audits, lacking clear inspection standards, and failing to maintain an effective control system. In its final report, the NTSB delivered a severe warning. The safety oversight systems of both Boeing and the FAA failed simultaneously at multiple levels. This was not just a rare or isolated mishap, but a glaring example of the systemic risks deeply embedded within the U.S. aviation industry. The Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 incident was not just a technical failure. It became the tipping point that unleashed a full-blown trust crisis, one that had been simmering since the two fatal crashes involving Lion Air Flight 610 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 just a few years earlier. Faith in the manufacturer's commitment to safety and product integrity, once considered the gold standard of American aviation, has now been severely shaken. The most immediate consequence has been a series of strict corrective measures imposed both by regulators and from within Boeing's own leadership. First came production limits. The FAA mandated that Boeing cap its monthly output of 737 MAX aircraft at no more than 38 units until the company completes a comprehensive overhaul of its safety systems and manufacturing processes. This figure falls well below Boeing's original recovery targets and has had a significant impact on revenue and delivery schedules for airlines worldwide. Next is heightened oversight. The agency has stationed full-time inspectors inside the production plants and now conducts weekly progress review meetings with top executives. This level of direct, ongoing regulatory involvement is unprecedented in the history of FAA's relationship with a major U.S. aircraft manufacturer. On the technical front, the door plug, the direct cause of the incident, has been ordered to undergo a complete redesign. Boeing and its supplier, Spirit Aerosystems, are now rebuilding the door structure to include redundant locking mechanisms to prevent future in-flight dislodgement. However, the new design is not expected to receive FAA certification or widespread installation until at least 2026. Legally, the company is also entering a period of intense litigation. The company faces numerous lawsuits from passengers aboard Flight 1282, along with federal criminal investigations related to violations of prior safety agreements. These legal challenges carry significant financial and operational risks and may result in hefty penalties or long-term regulatory restrictions. Finally, the crisis has triggered a leadership shakeup. CEO Dave Calhoun announced his resignation, making way for Kelly Ortberg, a leader widely expected to bring fresh direction to Boeing's corporate culture. Ortberg's top mandate will be to rebuild public trust and embed a genuine, company-wide commitment to safety, moving beyond paperwork and into tangible action. What started as a seemingly isolated incident has now forced Boeing into a sweeping transformation, technically, operationally, culturally, and reputationally. Following the NTSB's release of its final investigation report in June 2025, the Federal Aviation Administration announced that it would fundamentally change the way it oversees Boeing. This declaration underscored both the gravity of the incident and the regulator's growing loss of trust in America's largest aircraft manufacturer. The FAA outlined a comprehensive overhaul of its inspection processes across Boeing's entire production line, from assembly stages to final quality checks. Unannounced and surprise inspections will now occur more frequently to eliminate the procedural complacency that plagued earlier oversight efforts. Most notably, The FAA has called for an independent third-party review of Boeing's entire safety culture, something many industry experts believe has been neglected for years. On its part, the jet manufacturer has pledged a series of reforms aimed at easing public concern and addressing regulatory demands. First, the company is implementing new quality control standards, tightening each step in the process of component removal, installation, inspection, and technical documentation. In parallel, Boeing is enhancing production staff training, focusing on hands-on experience, critical task execution, and fostering a genuine workplace safety culture. The company has also announced a broad revamp of its risk and safety management systems, including the addition of independent quality checks and the introduction of early warning mechanisms to flag errors during production. Finally, the company has committed to deploying the redesigned plug system across the entire MAX fleet as soon as it receives regulatory approval, a tangible step toward permanently eliminating the risk of similar occurrences. However, according to many industry analysts, rebuilding public and customer trust will be a long and difficult journey. Technical fixes and process reforms are just the beginning. More critically, Boeing will need to demonstrate consistent, long-term action that proves safety is not just a slogan, but a deeply embedded corporate value. After years of crisis, trust, once lost, cannot be regained with a few statements or short-term measures. The door blowout on Flight 1282 stands as a stark reminder of a timeless, yet often overlooked lesson in aviation. Even the smallest oversight in a technical process, if left unchecked, can lead to catastrophic consequences. Just 4 bolts, a seemingly minor detail that anyone might dismiss as an insignificant error. But it caused an emergency exit door to rip away mid-flight at an altitude of over 16,000 feet. The result? A gaping hole in the cabin, and hundreds of passengers and crew suddenly in immediate danger. Fortunately, no lives were lost. But had the incident occurred at a higher altitude, or had passengers been seated closer to the door, the outcome could have been a full-scale aviation disaster. Aviation has always been an industry where there is no room for carelessness. Every bolt, every fastener, and every component is meticulously calculated, tested, and verified, because the lives of hundreds of people depend on these seemingly lifeless parts functioning flawlessly. The Alaska 1282 incident is a powerful reminder that a single weak link in the chain can trigger a complete system failure. For Boeing, this is not just about fixing a door. It is about addressing a far greater challenge: patching up the many holes of public trust that the company itself created over more than a decade. It began with the 2 tragic 737 MAX crashes, and it continued through a series of production scandals that followed. Overhauling its safety culture, increasing transparency in its processes, and placing human lives above all commercial pressures are no longer optional. They are survival imperatives if Boeing wants to retain its place in the global aviation industry. In the years to come, the lessons from Alaska Airlines Flight 1282 will undoubtedly be taught in aviation academies. They will be discussed in technical safety meetings and cited repeatedly as a textbook example of why safety can never be treated as a minor issue.